All right, Will Manso here with Miami Sports Pod. Minus Clay Ferrero this week. Clay's got Monday off, so I figured I'd do a little Monday morning slash afternoon slash early evening quarterback. After a busy football weekend in South Florida, some good news, some bad news, and some really ugly news when it concerned the Miami Hurricanes and the Miami Dolphins. But I want to start with Miami Dolphins, their win 16-10 over the Steelers on Sunday night, having a little chance at reflection. I was out at the game covering it for Local 10, and you never apologize for a win. It's something I always love to say after a victory, and I've heard players and coaches say it for years. You take wins as they come. And for the Miami Dolphins, after losing 3 straight games and having the quarterback carousel of all these guys injured, and Tua was out of the lineup for 2.5 games, and Teddy Bridgewater then out, and all these different things, Skylar Thompson making his debut. It was nice to see Tua be out there, lead the offense to a great drive to open the game. And again, the defense in this case did enough to get Miami that 16-10 win. But as I look back on it, there were some things you could learn from. And I think it's always good to learn from a game in which you win as opposed to a game in which you lose. So the Dolphins are going to take it. And I tell every Dolphin fan the same thing that I've talked to, whether it's on social media or out at the game on Sunday night, is enjoy the win. Take the win. They're hard to come by in the NFL, and after a 3-0 start, the Dolphins really needed that one against the Steelers. So let's talk about Tua Tagovailoa, his return, what we saw, what needed to happen. I think what we did see as the Dolphins snapped that 3-game losing streak. And when you look at the play of Tua, I start with that first drive, and it was great to see him out there and leading the offense. Like the fans like to say, Tua was cooking. He was clicking. And I thought it was a sign of big things to come, because when you look at the way the game was setting up, the sold-out crowd, you had the high energy, you had Tua and the excitement on prime time. You had that first drive where he was hitting Tyreek Hill. He was hitting Jalen Waddle. The passes were quick. The passes were crisp. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of shut down. They had the field goal drive, a couple of them in that first quarter to build that 13-0 lead. And the Dolphins, outside of a field goal in that second quarter, didn't score the rest of the way and only scored that one touchdown. And on night the 72 Dolphins team were honored. On the night that you had the return of Brian Flores, all the storylines, I think Tua showed you why he's so valuable to this team. The offense just looks much more efficient and comfortable. I'm not exactly sure, though, why Mike McDaniel kind of shied away from that. He really started to go toward, a conservative game plan, running the ball, questionable calls, which I'll get to in a moment, the way he handles certain situations. And I think in a night like this, I know Tua, you may have worried a bit about rust. I know that you know that the Steelers, a Mike Tomlin-led team, Brian Flores on the other side, some very talented defensive players, one of the former Dolphins players, Micah Fitzpatrick on that side. They've got a good defense. I know you're worried about that turnover. You're worried about the mistakes, but I think you got to kind of ride with your guy. And I think the Dolphins left a lot of points out on the board. Tua himself said after the game, there were opportunities there that we didn't make plays. Specific plays where maybe I didn't throw the ball well, or a receiver, maybe the pattern wasn't correct, or the offensive line didn't protect. And you go down the list. Again, these are things you love to discuss following a win, but I think there are things that quietly, right, in these first 7 games have been shown by this offense that they're not quite clicking yet. And Mike McDaniel's known as an offensive guru, an offensive genius. And, there are weapons with, I mentioned Tyreek, Jalen Waddle. You saw Mike Gesicki there. There are weapons there. And I think when you look at what Miami was able to do, they showcased some of those weapons, but they didn't do it enough. And I think that's where Mike McDaniel has to look at the first 7 games. What is the pattern there? Why are we bogging down to get into the end zone? What is it that we can't finish drives and score touchdowns? Outside of that big fourth quarter in Baltimore, the Dolphins offense has had trouble scoring. I mean, they haven't had trouble moving the ball. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are 2 of the top receivers in the NFL statistically. But Gesicki has made enough plays. I think you got to love what you see in Raheem Mostert, the way he's been running the ball. Chase Edmonds, not so much, and I'll get to that in a moment when we talk more about McDaniel's decisions. But I think when you look at this game, again, when you look at what Tua was able to do, there were plays left there that I think big picture they can't do as the season goes on, as they get into this playoff race. Because make no mistake about it, the Dolphins are in a playoff race. They're going to be in that mix in the AFC. It doesn't look like they'll be in the division race. The Bills look just head and shoulders above the rest. And I know Miami beat them earlier in the season, but to me, Buffalo and Kansas City are the 2 teams that you look at in the AFC as the teams that are just at another level. But that doesn't mean the Dolphins can't be on that level below as one of the better teams there. I think the potential is there, but I think you got to kind of unleash Tua and let him go. And Tua has shown the ability this year to put the ball where it needs to be. He's not afraid to make plays, sometimes so much so. I think I know all the fans were holding their breath when they saw Tua go right at a defender and take him on basically head on. Yeah, don't do that anymore, Tua. You don't want to get hurt. Mike McDaniel had warned him all week, don't do that. And I know Tua said after the game, yeah, I just wanted to kind of knock the rust off and be back in there and show him ready to play. Do that by sliding. It's okay to slide. It's okay to give yourself up. The Dolphins need you. And they really do, because I think the storyline as you see this and you see what they were able to do is that for the most part, Tua was good. For the most part, Tua was efficient, but for whatever reason, there are big portions of the game. And again, outside of that Baltimore fourth quarter, they've shown it all year where they can't finish drives, and they need to start being able to finish those drives, because in the competitiveness of a playoff race, field goals and near touchdowns are not going to cut it. This is a team that has to finish drives. But you look at the way they won the game. You look at a game, you talk about complementary football, right? The defense played very well. So when you look at defensively what they were able to do, to me, that's where you really sit there. Like, okay, Tua's back. You see what you have done. When Tua plays, this team wins. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I want to say the Dolphins in their last 13 games that Tua has completed, right, that he's finished, he isn't left with injury, the Dolphins have won 12 of them. That I know that wins aren't a quarterback stat, but I think it's pretty clear by that stat that the Dolphins are much better with Tua and need Tua out there. That they are a football team that he understands what he needs to do and how to get players involved. He makes enough big plays in big moments. I think any questions about Tua's durability are obviously things that are only going to get answered in the long run as the season goes on. Hopefully he does not get hurt again. But I think any questions about his leadership and his capability to make plays, I think all of a sudden kind of goes away. And when you look at then on the flip side, the defense, I mentioned that. Look, the defense needed to make plays on a day that Brian Flores returned and he was on the other side as the Steelers assistant. The defense he left behind is pretty darn good, especially when you got a guy like Noah Bignagany, who has struggled so much as a former first-round pick and something that I think most people will call a bust, right? Struggled throughout the night with a rookie quarterback and Kenny Pickett. The Steelers were picking on him. Ibignagany was getting thrown out every which way, but he made that big interception late. Javon Holland made a big play late. Here's a guy in his second year. I saw him before the game go over, give Flo a little high five and hug, because I think, he brought him in here along with Chris Greer. They drafted him. Javon is a special player and a playmaker. Jalen Phillips is another guy who, while the sack numbers may not be there are a few players in the NFL who get to the quarterback more, especially the last month. He's been wreaking havoc on quarterbacks in the backfield, constantly making plays. Xavier Howard, I thought, had a nice bounce back game after a couple of struggles, and they're still waiting for Byron Jones to come back. You have injuries all over that secondary. Brandon Jones left the game with a knee injury. This team finds a way. And on a night where the offense couldn't finish drives and didn't score a single point in the second half, the Dolphins defense made enough big plays, and it goes back to that cliche of complementary football. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they just beat the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. Kenny Pickett is a rookie who struggled and threw 3 interceptions. It clearly, outside of anything of 5-8 yards, it seems like he couldn't hit anything. But you play your opponent. You don't worry about the other stuff. And the Dolphins played their opponent well defensively, made enough plays. And in big moments, they're going to need that. They're going to need that complementary football. As I mentioned earlier, though, they need the offense. Raheem Mostert was great. I think they need to use more of him. I think Tua, again, made enough plays. The defense did, and you take the win as you come. Miami at 4-3. Now, one of the things I did reference earlier, though, is the questionable decisions by Mike McDaniel. I tweeted this during the game, or I should say after the game on Sunday night. I thought McDaniel, that was probably his poorest coach game. And in a way, it's kind of interesting because the Dolphins won the game. And you say to yourself, hey, it's the poorest coach game, but we won. I felt like there were a lot of plays out there that he made some interesting calls on personnel. And I think the play you go to the most, when you look at the most, is the 4th down and 3 when they bypassed on a chip shot field goal with Jason Sanders, who had hit 3 already. And you had a chance to take a 6-point lead to a 9-point lead in the second half, knowing you're playing a rookie quarterback who is struggling to finish drives, who is struggling to take, the Steelers, it felt like, a night the 72 Dolphins were honored. I felt like we were playing in the 70s with that offense. It was 5 yards, 3 yards, 2 yards, 4 yards. It was 12, 13, 14 plays to get down the field, and they were having trouble scoring. They finished one drive with a touchdown. So if you could get a 9-point lead, you have to know the situation. I love aggression. And the NFL more than ever, if you guys all watch, everybody watches games on Sunday. You see coaches constantly going forward on the plus side of the field on 4th down. And I love it. I think you want to be aggressive. but you got to be smart and pick and choose. And McDaniel said after the game that, look, we felt that if we got a 2-touchdown lead, like they would go from 6 to 13, you'd force the Steelers to basically score 2 touchdowns. With their defense, you're pretty much putting the game away. And I agree. I think that's true. But I think you also have to look at a 4th and 3 is not a gimme play. A chip shot field goal gives you a 9-point lead, and the odds of the Steelers scoring a touchdown and a field goal to beat you in the second half, the way they were moving the ball on offense, were also very slim. Not as slim as scoring 2 touchdowns, but slim enough where, to me, you take the points. And I think that's a decision Mike McDaniel's got to learn from. I think the personnel, too, he went away a lot from, go find your guys, put the ball in the hands of your playmakers. If you're going to go for it on 4th and 3, do not run Chase Edmonds on a draw. And if the play works, everybody says he's a genius and great call. But I think statistically, when you look at it, 3 yards is a long way to go. That's not like a 4th and 1 where you got a lot of options, a quarterback sneak, a quick little handoff, a little pitch. A 4th and 3 is a long way to go for a straight run, which is what the Dolphins call with Chase Edmonds. A draw play, hand it off, he runs right into the line. They're done. So outside of where I would have taken the points, if you're going to do that, let Tua and your playmakers make plays. And I wouldn't say handing it off to Chase Edmonds is a playmaker making a play. It's just not the case. I like Chase Edmonds a lot. I still think he can help this team. But in that situation, going for it, you're going for the knockout punch. You get Tua rolling out. You have him find Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle or Mike Gesicki or whatever it may be. You put the ball in Tua's hands because he had led you down on that drive, and it almost really hurt the Dolphins. And it's the reason that not taking those 3 points, the Steelers had a chance late to win that game. So I think wrapping it up with the storyline of what this was all about, you take a win. You're glad to have your quarterback back. Tua, please protect yourself. Do not do dumb things. Do not take big hits, because this team without you is not a playoff team, period. They showed it the last 2.5, 3 weeks. This team with you is a team that very much so, along with that defense, can be a playoff caliber team. So I hope McDaniel learns from that. As the Dolphins snap that 3-game losing streak, they move on. I think another storyline, when you look at this game on Sunday night, was the return of Brian Flores. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I found it interesting, all the stuff that was, flow back on the field, and it ended up being really a side note. And it probably was the fact because, look, Flo's not the head coach of the Steelers. He wasn't even on the field during the game. He spends his time in the booth as a defensive assistant. A lot of his former players were there in support of him. We saw Mike Gesicki give him a big hug. I mentioned earlier Javon Holland. I think that's fine. There is a respect there for the 3 years he spent here, a couple of them being winning seasons. But I felt like the storyline of Flo did go away once the game started. It had no impact on the result. It had no impact on what happened. There is always going to be that cloud until this gets resolved of him basically saying, all these allegations against the Dolphins, the NFL investigated, nothing more came of it, but that cloud that hangs over Stephen Ross and this organization, I found interesting. And I said this last week on the podcast with Clay, and I said it on our show, there was no way that Tua Tagovailoa was going to go over and say hello to Brian Flores or vice versa. And Flo, see that back in the end zone back there behind Tua where he was pregame? Flo at one point came around back there because he was working his way around the field. They didn't even look at each other. And when Tua was asked after the game, hey, did you say hi to Flo? Did you talk to him? He had a one-word answer. Nope. Yeah, nope indeed. So that storyline's done. I'm glad it is. Dolphins snapped their 3-game losing streak. And when Tua Tagovailoa walks off that field, more often than not, as that Dolphins quarterback, he's doing it as a winner. So if you're a Dolphin fan, you're glad to have him back as a winner, winning games. The Dolphins 4-3. They go to Detroit next. And what lines up now is an easier part of their schedule, which I think they're in position now to continue this, that 3-0 start, the 0-3 struggles, the quarterback issues with the injuries. They're not a perfectly healthy team. There are still issues to fix on that offensive line. But I think when you look at big picture, 4-3 through 7 games and having Tua healthy now, you've worked your way, hopefully, through anything you need to learn about your new head coach. I hope McDaniel stays aggressive on his play calling. I hope he continues to turn to his playmakers. And I hope the Dolphins can get healthy because they have got a portion of the schedule now where it does lighten up. And I think they're in position to make a playoff run. Again, maybe not a division run, but a playoff run. And don't forget, all of a sudden that AFC East where you thought it was just Miami and Buffalo, Jets are 5-2. And I know that Dolphin fans hate to hear this, but I think the Jets are actually pretty good. I think there's talent there. I think the Dolphins are more talented. But I think that thinking that the Jets are some crummy team and this is a bad football team that's just getting lucky, I don't think is it. I think the Jets have some And I guess after years of having all those high first-round picks, they finally hit on a few. They really did with their cornerback, Sauce Gardner. That kid could play. So the AFC East and this division race, and more importantly, the wild card race in the AFC is up in the air, and Miami in position to hopefully make a run down the stretch. Again, Lions next on Sunday. I want to talk some Hurricanes. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, being a Canes alum. Mario Cristobal had some interesting comments on Monday. And if you didn't hear, basically, he was saying that there have been inadequacies in this program for a very long time, and they haven't shied away from that. And I think a lot of Canes fans may take that as excuse making for a team that's 3-4 and lost to Duke on Saturday in embarrassing fashion over at Hard Rock. I mean, to lose 45-21 to Duke, I'm sorry. I don't care how inadequate the program is. You just cannot do that. So that's number one. But I do think that, to Mario's point, there's a lot to build. And, when he took this job, one thing I give Cristobal credit for is he didn't promise quick fixes. He says it's going to take work. It's going to take his kind of guys. It's going to take recruiting cycles, building trust, building that hard discipline and habits that it takes to become a winner. So I give him that. But I also will say this: the Canes shouldn't be 3-4. Tyler Van Dyke hasn't fit into this offense. Now he's hurt. Jake Garcia stepped in and struggled. There is enough talent on this team to not lose to Middle Tennessee, to not get embarrassed at home to Duke, to win games in the ACC against North Carolina. Texas A&M, tough road game. You can give them that, fine. This team is better than 3-4. They should be. And I am with Mario in the sense that it's going to take time, that this is not a quick fix. And I've said that all along, that you've got to let him get his recruiting classes in. You've got to let him build this. To hear Mario, though, finally say it in public, I had people behind the scenes tell me when Mario came on, look, man, this is worse than we thought it was. This is like, well, Manny Diaz left, and this, old AD left, and Blake James, and Dan Radakovich is trying to fix from a facility standpoint, from a talent standpoint, Mario's recruiting. This is a mess. So I think Canes fans who were expecting a Coastal title and a team competing for a national championship were probably a little delusional in Mario's first year. But I think it could be both, right? I don't think it's as simple as Mario's taking over a struggling program, a bad program, and it's going to get ugly, right? I still think you can expect better than what you've seen. But I will say this: it's going to be bad before it's going to be good. And any fan of the Canes that is out there questioning Mario Cristobal as the hire, questioning the decisions of the staff, in particular Josh Gaddis as offensive coordinator, and wanting to call for firings and major changes, stop right now. It's okay to be disappointed. I'm disappointed this Canes game is 3-4. I'm disappointed they lost by 3 touchdowns to Duke at home. That's embarrassing. It shouldn't be that way. And that falls on Cristobal, because you got to get the most out of the players you have. You can't just say my players stink, or my players don't buy in, or these aren't my players, and then say it's okay to have that attitude. But you separate that from the big picture truth, and the big picture truth is you've got to give Mario and his staff time as far as what they build moving forward. Let them continue with the recruiting cycle of what they bring in. Let them continue with the habits they're trying to teach these players and build. Let's see, there's the old trimming the fat, right? Let's see when the fat gets trimmed. When I say that, the players that maybe don't want to be there, or they're Mario's guys that aren't putting in the work, when you trim that and you're left with a team that works hard and is buying into what Mario is selling, then maybe you'll get better results as the season goes on. Or at least you'll find out who of this group is going to be part of the future in the next year or two, along with the recruits that Cristobal brings. But remember, Mario Cristobal signed for a long time for big money. He brought in these offensive coordinators, much ballyhooed. Again, Josh Gaddis and the changes in the make, Kevin Steele, who I think is outstanding as a defensive guy. They brought in these guys with a vision and a plan. And look no further than Oregon. If you really want to, if you're feeling bad as a Canes fan and you're down on everything, and trust me, I understand why. Look no further than Oregon, where Mario had 4 or 5 years of recruiting and had just recruited one of the top classes in the history of Oregon. And they're one of the better teams in the country right now from a talent perspective. The staff that took over there when Mario left is doing a good job with the talent Mario left behind. So if Mario can continue to recruit and have that kind of talent and his system works, then in a year or two, you could see this program be where it wants to be in that competing for ACC championships. It is disappointing. It's okay to say that. I feel they should I feel that at least one of I don't think they should have lost Middle Tennessee. I don't think they should lose to 3 touchdowns by Duke. It's okay to say that and also buy into the fact that Mario Cristobal has a plan, a vision, and I think you got to let that plan and vision kind of play out to what the Canes could be. So that's a condensed and solo Miami Sports Pod. Always list your comments, by the way, for those of you watching on our YouTube page. I always like to read them when I get the chance. Agree, disagree, or not. Clay and I will be back, meanwhile, next week as the Dolphins go to Detroit. The Canes have a game at Virginia. We'll continue to follow how the Heat are playing, of course, and we'll kind of go along with this ride of crazy South Florida sports right now. What was a busy football weekend. Good for the Dolphins, not so good for the Miami Hurricanes.